just about sailing, October 2019. Right, time to fess up and show how I actually made the hole in the boat. This video is going to be all about fixing this hole in the boat. But first of all, let's have a look at the gash that I made, and let's have a look at this accident that I had over 2 years ago now. So I'll show you a clip where I did sort of mention it, but not really. And I haven't really talked about this, is this. Let's see if I can zoom in on that using the magic of my remote control. There we go. That is a little indent, and that is quite a big scratch, and this needs sorted out. So here's Serenity in Ramsgate, and she's on the naughty step a little bit. I might talk about why, because there's no friends near her. So anyway, that was a clip from May 2017, 2 years ago. And what had happened is I was coming into Ramsgate Harbour, and I made that typical mistake of looking at where I wanted to go. The wind was on the port side. What I should have done is lined up a transit, because I had to ferry glide all the way into Ramsgate, and I just lost concentration and I bashed the side into this bit of pontoon here, and that's what caused the damage. Right, so this is the V-berth. As you can see, that's the anchor locker, which I mentioned I'm going to be doing before. This is where all the this stuff got taken off. I'm going to do this slightly differently. I think I'm probably going to put some insulation there and finish this off slightly differently. But so here's the thing we want to focus on. I'm not sure how clearly this is going to come out, but this is the inside of the damage, and you can see where the fibre has split. So I'm not sure at the moment how big a hole I'm going to make. I'm hoping that I don't have to cut this off, but given that I'm going to do most of the repair from the outside, which I'll explain later, I think that should be okay. So I'm just going to drill a hole at either end and see where that comes out from the outside. Then I've got to clean all of this back. I've put 2 sticks in here. This first one is pretty much exactly the point of impact. It's just ever so slightly behind the big dent, and then the second one is towards the end of it, because obviously I bashed into that pontoon, slammed the brakes on, put her in reverse, and then tried to steer away. So this was the heaviest bit, and then you can see where it comes off here. So next job is to really clean up inside, but whilst I'm doing that, let's just do a bit of theory, and I'll kind of talk through exactly what it is that I'm going to do. And as I always say, don't copy me. You know, if I do this and I sink, that's my fault. If you do this and you sink, that's your fault. I'm not taking any of the blame, seriously. So anyway, good old Serenity. Let's see just how big a patch we need to do. Right, so here we go. This is the this is the theory part. So I've exaggerated this to make a big curve here. This is a cross section through the hull, and basically I bashed into the pier about here, say, which created a crack through there, which was about 1 foot long, but as I say, this is a cross section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out a hunk of this around the crack completely. I'm then going to do all the glassing from the outside. So what I need to do is then measure the thickness, which I think is about 10, and do a chamfer about 12 to 1, so that'll be 12 centimetres. So 12 centimetres from here, sorry, 12 centimetres from here to here will kind of give us something like that. I'll cut this off. Another one there. I'm going to put a layer of fibreglass behind here where the hole is, glue that in, just overlapping the edges, and then I'm going to glass it from this side. Okay, so let's imagine I've cut the hole, cut these 2 chamfers off, and that leaves me something like this. Hopefully that makes sense. So this is the existing hull. This is the little patch that I've put in. And what I will probably do is put a couple of pieces of fiberglass on the back just to kind of strengthen that a bit. Probably don't need to, but you know, I'm going to. This in pink, by the way. I could get away with putting a flat piece, but I actually want to make it as near to the shape of the hull as possible. In reality, it is almost flat, but I'm gonna try a little technique by putting some sticky back plastic on here and putting the fiberglass on there, and then seeing if I can maintain that shape. And then it is a question simply of, and I used blue for the fiberglass, of putting the fiberglass across here. Now in reality, because this is a curve, this shouldn't be flat. This should actually maintain a slight sort of bow. So when I'm actually cutting this, I will try just ever so slightly to have a bow here, but as I say, because it's actually flat, I don't really need to do that. Does that make sense? I'm sure there's a mathematical model somewhere to do that, so that it follows the curve. So then, very, very simple. You start with, so if it's 10 centimetres, I would need 20 layers, so 10 centimetres, 10 millimetres, and you put the biggest one on first, and then one that's slightly smaller, etc, etc. Yep, and then put filler around the side, and I'm probably going to use 409 filler. Smooth it off, put probably 1 or 2 coats of epoxy to weatherproof it, and then prime it. The age-old question, by the way, is why don't you put the smaller ones on first? Well, you could do, and I covered this when I looked at replacing the through hull. The problem is there, what you've got is you haven't got the biggest mechanical bond area, you've simply got this little bit. These are all kind of hanging on by the edges. You could get little air bubbles in here. It's not as strong. You know, there are people who do it the other way, but all of the manufacturers, all of the epoxy manufacturers say to do it this way. Anyway, let's go and make a really big hole in the boat and get the wonderful flappy tool thing on the grinder, and let's actually go and do this. The big problem I've got at the moment, to be quite honest, is the weather. It's just rain, rain, rain. It's warm enough, but it's rain. The first job, and I am all tied up and stuff for this case, is I want to clean the area out around here. These two, I mean, this might look perfectly smooth and lovely, but obviously I know there is damage. So it's to smooth this out, which involves getting this horrible glue stuff off. Now in the past, I've used one of these, which is great. I've sanded, I've scraped, I've used a flapper disc on the angle grinder. I'm going to have a go at using these things, which I've seen people do. I think the art of this is to do it gently, so let's just see if this is any more effective. I hate contact adhesive, and the only thing worse than putting it on is taking it off. So ultimately I need to do the whole of the V-berth. Let's just see if we can get a decent sized area here. Okay, so I'm actually doing this very, very lightly, and I think it's coming off quite nicely. Very, very dusty, obviously, but I'm going to give it a go with this, just to compare, and then I might have a quick go with the angle grinder, which has always been my preferred but slightly brutal way of doing it. But yeah, that's quite good. So let's try the, and this is 3M Scotch-Brite. Okay, I don't think there's a huge amount of difference, to be honest. This is harder work by far. With the other one I was just letting it gently rest. They are both pretty good. Right, as I thought, the flapper disc is absolutely brutal. It cuts through the best, the easiest, and it doesn't take much effort. I think you can see that where it has got through to the end, this is probably woven mat, it doesn't mind whether it's cutting the glue or the fiberglass, whereas these, I've lost it. Whereas these two do seem to cut the glue and not go through into the fiberglass. So I will probably use a combination of these two to do all of it. The reason I went in with a little bit more detail around here is simply because I want a smooth surface here for what I'm going to do next in terms of putting a backing on for when I start to cut. Don't get me wrong, this is fabulous and I should be using this on the outside, but boy is it a brutal tool. One of my favourites, by the way. So, okay, let me show you what I think is probably a slightly weird thing that I'm going to do next with this, but it kind of makes sense to me. There is a bit of a curve here, and I'm not just going to put a flat bit of backing, I want to actually match the curve. So this is partly one of these principal things. If ever I have to do it again, and there was a pronounced curve, this is how I do it. And it's best to practice on something that's fairly simple, so that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. I have some clear sticky-backed plastic, and I'm hoping that this is the type of plastic that epoxy doesn't stick to. So, the most difficult thing of any project involving sticky back plastic is peeling the back off, but if you were raised on blue peach, as I mentioned several times before, you know that the way of doing this is to cut it, when you cut it at a slight angle, just enable you to get your thumb underneath. And the next thing is to try to stop it sticking to itself. So I'll put this roughly mix up some epoxy. I've just got one squirt of hardener, and I might need two, just one squirt of hardener. And apply it. Of course I can barely see where this see-through stuff is now. I'm just going to put an initial coating on, and then I shall apply the fiberglass cloth. I'm using 450 because I have got a ton of it. So apply this. Right, let's let that dry for 2 days. I just want to put a couple of marks so I know where this has come from. I'm going to do this roughly along the line where the holes are, and roughly in the middle. Easy peasy, and peel this from the fiberglass. Perfect. Now, as you can see, I think there is hardly any sort of curve in that, and it really didn't matter so much, but it was to just prove that this concept works. Right. Don the safety equipment. 2 big holes there, and I'm basically going to make a big letterbox in Serenity. More holes in the boat, I don't know. That's scary. I hope that's the biggest hole I ever have to drill in my boat. Right, so the next step is, this is just slightly less than a centimetre thick. It's to do a 12mm line all the way around, which is going to be the edge of the chamfer, the bevel that I'm going to put on. It's massive, and obviously the reason that it seems a lot bigger than the ones that I was doing when I did the through holes is because I'm doing all of the fiberglass is going onto this side, apart from the backing bit, which I'm going to do as soon as I've done that. I'm not going to show a huge amount of this grinding because it's taken me ages, several days in fact, because of the energy levels. But one of the key things, I'm not going to get it exact, but is to try and get this slope as much from a razor edge up here to the level of this. And what I'm going to do, gosh, actually that's surprisingly good. What I'm going to do is just mark some of the high spots, because I'm very nearly there now, so I'm just going to mark some of the high spots that I need to take down. With these things, it's never a question of when you've finished, it's a question of when you decide to stop. So I'm going to do these ones and then that's it. Then I'm going to tidy up these edges a little bit, probably with a random orbital sander, and then I'm going to get to and actually put the backing plate in at the back. Right, the other thing I need to do is to trace out the size and shape of this. The only reason I'm using peel ply for this, by the way, is because it's a bit windy and this is the least blowy away sort of see-through stuff I've got. There we go, that'll do for that. And now I'm just going to draw a small line around about a centimetre or even slightly less, yeah, around about a centimetre. Because that's going to be my patch. I've dusted and cleaned all this down. Doesn't matter dreadfully because this is ready to put backing, and I'm going to put another piece of fiberglass on the back. So hopefully a normal pair of scissors will be able to peel the can. Brilliant. I've just peeled a little bit of peel ply off to get it started. And that will go on there quite nicely. Just need to figure out a way of holding it there. Right then, so yes, I have wetted out the edges. Mixed up some 406. Too much of it, I think. So there we go. Arrow up, make sure I got it the right way around. Line everything up. Wonderful. Right, gonna leave that overnight. And I'm just going to go and scrape this stuff off the outside. So I have to say that is actually a really nice join around there, obviously a bit squished through, but I don't want any air bubbles there, so leave that to dry and start the other glass fibering. I think you can see even from this part that the actual width of the hull varies a little bit, but most of it, I've kind of averaged it out, is about 8mm and not what I thought originally. Also, this yellow that you can see, that seems to be gel coat. I thought it was paint, but that's actually 1mm thick. So where I did the through holes before, the hole was actually 10mm. This is about 8. So I'm revising the number of sheets of 450 that I need to put down to 16 because they're about 0.5mm per sheet. So let's go ahead and cut these out. Because as I've just said, this is about 8mm rather than 10mm. I've probably made the chamfer a little bit longer than I needed to, but it doesn't matter. That's a good thing rather than a bad thing. The bad thing would be to make it too short. So the first thing I've done, if you can see these, is I've put some little dots. There we go. I've put some kind of dots so that I can draw these circles round. And this is always a pain. This is going to take ages. I'm not going to video all of this, but basically you need to use something as a template and then cut round it, and then draw the next line and then cut round that and slowly get to 16 sheets of 450 gram biaxial fiberglass. So let's go ahead and cut these. Right, this has taken ages, but I now have, you'll notice by the way, that says 17 on it. I meant to do 16, but I managed to get my concentric circles slightly wrong. But I did say that this was in parts 8 and in parts sort of 10, so that's fine. That took forever to do that. We've now got about 2 solid weeks of rain forecast with the exception of tomorrow, so I'm hoping, I'm bringing the epoxy inside, I'm going to make sure it's all nice and warm and so on. It is still warm enough for epoxy, but it's much easier to do this when the epoxy is flowing, so cross fingers and I'll see you tomorrow, or in your case literally about a quarter of a second. Right then, that's all nicely sorted. It's been wet for the last few days, so what I actually did is I put some extra backing behind there just to make it a bit stiffer. I've got my table's worth of stuff, a little step up because it's a little bit high. It's not supposed to be raining today and the clouds have got gaps in, so I'm reasonably confident. Oh, and the other thing by pure luck that I noticed is that I actually cut the first piece too big. So I'm going to start with piece number 2, so that does take me back down to 16, so I could say I planned that all along, but I didn't. I can't remember if I said, but I did sort of heat this up. I kept it next to the radiator overnight, so although the temperature outside is about 14, 15, no, it's higher than that, it's going to go down to about 14, 15, which is still warm enough. This is quite nice and runny, because epoxy really does thicken up if it's too cold. So, as always, the first thing to do is to put a coat in to help the physical bond, the mechanical bond. And is good practice, and if you see any of my videos, I just always do this. Always. Right, and now some 406. Not as thick as I would normally make it. I've probably done that slightly too thick, but it doesn't really matter. And this is because, although this has worked out quite well, there is still a bit of a ridge there, so I just want to fill this in and give a quick brush over just in case there are any air bubbles. Right, and on with the first sheet, as I say, cunningly marked number 2. It's a bit windy, don't want it to blow away. Right, so this is fairly straightforward laminating, to be quite honest. What I would have done to do this again is actually put a little centre mark, a little cross or a dot in the middle to help me with actually lining up each subsequent piece. Part of the reason for that is that I'd underestimated the amount of effort that it would take by doing this above my head, and also the length of time. And as I said before, I do have a health problem at the moment, which means I lose energy very quickly. And that's mental as well as physical energy. So what you will notice is that as I'm putting them on, they're kind of getting a little bit lower and to the left. I don't think it's a problem. I think I will be able to cover that up, but I didn't really notice it until I watched this speeded up clip back. So as I say, not really a problem, but in retrospect, that's what I would do differently. But hey ho, worst things happen at sea, and to get to sea, you've got to get your boat patched up first. So no, I'm generally quite happy with that, and I enjoy doing this type of fiberglassing. Oh, right, now for the final bit, peel ply. And as you may or may not know, I'm on a kind of a health 45 minutes of energy at a time thing, and my 45-minute buzzer went off. I can't remember, I think it's about the number 10, and I'm absolutely completely done in. But now for the peel ply. Right, the battery just died, so I don't know. I think I got all of the putting the laminate on, but I'm not sure if I got putting the peel ply on. So I now have put peel ply on. It is really difficult to see whether it fits the curve of the boat or not. Nothing that can't be fixed with some filler, etc. It's not perfect, but do you know what? I'm happy with that. Now the problem I've got now is that we've got 2 weeks of rain, so I might put this video out now and then do a second part of doing the filler, or well, we'll see what happens. Yeah, the weather forecast is awful. One of the newspapers said we're actually in for 100 days of rain, so I'm going to have to build a sort of a tent thing over the front of Serenity, because as well as finishing this bit of epoxy work outside, I need to do some glassing on the deck at the front, ready to put the electric windlass in. So anyway, I shall see you next time.